Happy Friday, everyone. It's time for another live broadcast. These are a lot of fun and they are getting a lot of traction. So, thank you, everyone, for watching these. It's a pleasure for us to be with you discussing global affairs. My name is Adriano Bossoni. I am RANE's Senior Europe Analyst. And joining me today is my very good friend, Matt Orr. He's our Senior Eurasia Analyst. If he looks tired, it's because, well, everyone knows what's happening with the conflict in Ukraine. And boy, it's been tough. It's been tough, Matt, trying to follow every announcement, follow every move by Russia, by NATO, by the US, by Europe, by Ukraine. But you are there. It's Friday. You have survived yet another week of forecasting and analyzing the situation. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. We know you are super busy, so thanks for that.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
So Matt, let's keep this simple, at least to begin with. Why so much fuss about Ukraine? Why are we talking about this? Why are the media covering this so much? Why should we care about what's happening right now in Ukraine?
Yeah. So, if in short, the long term kind of strategy here is that Ukraine is continuing to drift away from Russia's orbit, right? Its kind of traditional sphere of influence, as it likes to think about it. Moscow recently has become aware that these long term trends are going to continue to strengthen. And so it's looking to find a way to keep Ukraine in its orbit in as low a cost a way as possible, while it still feels that its power is that it is high and that there's these memories of the Cold War and kind of Russia's expected place in Europe. And it thinks that it can leverage its military posture to achieve a lot of this. And I think we can actually go ahead and throw up the map that we've prepared, because this shows the details of kind of what this military buildup looks like, right? So what we're dealing with is Russia moving dozens of these battalion tactical groups, which are its subdivisions of military units, all along borders, even into Belarus, a border that for many years Ukraine did not think about as a security threat, because Ukraine and Belarus used to enjoy good relations, relatively good relations, but not anymore. And so really we're seeing kind of an unprecedented threat to Ukraine's security that is kind of leading to all these concerns about a possible Russian invasion.
But I guess a question that a lot of people have is, why now? Ukraine has been an independent country for over 30 years. Russia is in a relatively stable situation. They sell lots of natural gas and oil to Europe. They have a rather somewhat stable economy. President Putin is in a somewhat stable and comfortable situation. So why now? Why create this big tension with the West?
Yeah.
At a time which it may not make that much sense, at least for external watchers of the situation.
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons. A lot of them are related to things going on in Ukraine. So one of them is that last year, the Zelensky administration began kind of cracking down on a lot of the pro-Russian forces inside the country. There was this pro-Russian oligarch who led pro-Russian political forces named Viktor Medvedchuk, who Zelensky put under house arrest and shut down his pro-Russian TV channels, which were spreading a lot of this pro-Russian narrative in the country. Additionally, Putin, when Zelensky came to office as president of Ukraine, thought that Zelensky would essentially cave to a lot of Russia's demands, because Zelensky had campaigned on promises of peace, as opposed to the previous Ukrainian president, who was named Petro Poroshenko, who was the so-called war candidate, right? And then you throw in other factors like the US's withdrawal from Afghanistan, and kind of this idea that Moscow feels that this is a uniquely it's a time where the West is kind of unsure of itself, and it can hearken a lot of these images of refugees and the collapse of the Western norms and order to kind of scare the West potentially into making concessions. So it senses blood in the water or vulnerability, and it's trying to see what it can get from that.
Okay, that makes sense. And the thing is, a lot of the media attention has been kind of binary, in the sense that a lot of the coverage and a lot of the conversation was about war or no war. But after hearing you talk about this so many times during our internal meetings, and after hearing you present about this issue to clients, I got the impression that it's not as clear cut as one would think, right? It's not a binary situation in which either there is a proper, formal, boots on the ground invasion or nothing, right?
Absolutely.
This is Russia we are talking about. So the reality is likely to be a bit of more of gray and not so much black or white.
Absolutely, right. I mean, I think that's what gets missed out here, right? Obviously, a full-scale Russian invasion is not impossible. It's possible, and they're hinting at that possibility, but it's not the most likely scenario. And there's a lot of things that Russia can do to further escalate, to further increase its leverage, without having to resort to a very, very costly step, right? So, short of war, we could see the Russians massively increase their military presence in the western part of their country in a semi-permanent way, right? Essentially saying that we're going to make new bases closer to the Ukrainian border. So the upkeep cost of keeping a lot of these troops in this alleged threat to Ukraine is almost becoming more permanent. They could move additional weapon systems closer to Ukraine and to NATO, potentially into Belarus, potentially very close to the Baltic states, right? Hinting that if they're not going to take our security demands seriously, then we're going to increase the threat against them, right? To show them why they need to do this. Other options that kind of are more kinetic, but still not an invasion of Ukraine. The most obvious is, of course, escalating the Donbass conflict, where you could see the Donbass separatists.
Sorry, for people who have not been following internal Ukrainian politics, what is that? What is the Donbass?
Conflict? So that's the low-level conflict that has raged in eastern Ukraine by Russian-backed separatists since 2014.
Okay.
And the idea there is that the troops positioned all along Ukraine's borders would prevent the Ukrainian army from responding with full force to a separatist offensive, right? Because the Ukrainians would be so scared that if we respond in full force, that's what Russia could immediately use as the pretext for a potential invasion, to protect their citizens in the Donbass. So those are just some of the things short of a full scale invasion that Russia's hinting at, that Russia's threatening, that it could take instead of going through this very costly, high cost invasion scenario.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, the fact that the outcome of this conflict may not be so clear cut makes it super hard for the West to react, right? We have seen the European Union, the United States saying, if there is an invasion, then we will impose sanctions on you, we will isolate you, we will make you suffer. But the thing is, there may not be a proper invasion with a proper army crossing the border and saying, here we are invading you. So this is why it's super tough, especially for the European Union, to come up with a coherent response to whatever Russia will try to do in Ukraine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Russia loves when these tensions within the EU, tensions within the European Union, between the European states, but also transatlantic between the US and the EU. They love when these tensions start coming out. Oh, and it turns out the Germans aren't really prepared to sanction Russian energy. And oh, look, the Baltic states want to send all of this, the support the Germans don't want to, and so on. And oh, now we have the French President Macron trying a separate track. And oh, how is that going to compete, or is it going to complement the US track? What's going right? So, the Kremlin loves that, and so that this kind of
not that. I mean, it's not that hard to create divisions within the European Union, right? It's not that the Russians have achieved something spectacular. It's just it's a very tiny push, and you get all the European member states like fighting with each other.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, having this in mind, we think that the West's reaction will kind of depend on Russia's actions, right? It's not like the same thing that the Russian action will not be black or white. We have a full spectrum of potential European and American retaliation measures, right?
Right, precisely. So the idea is, sanctions should be proportionate to Russia's actions, and that's clear to Russia no matter what. That's not news to them, right? So the idea is that these very high cost sanctions, things like sanctions on the Russian banking sector, the things that have been talked about, like removal of Russia from SWIFT. I mean, things like that would only come in the case of an invasion. Short of an invasion, the sanction response is clear. If they escalate the conflict, sure, more sanctions, but none of the really threatening stuff to Russia. And so, yeah, the sanctions response is unclear at this time. If Russia takes this military technical response, I think we could see some small symbolic sanctions on Russia to show dissatisfaction, but nothing really serious.
Will there continue to be vodka in Western European discos? That's a big question for some.
Yes. No. Yeah. I mean, look. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't. The sanctions would not touch things like consumer products unless, again, it's this major invasion scenario.
Okay, that's good to know. It's funny that you mentioned Germany, because Germany has always this kind of uncomfortable position when it comes to Russia, right? It happened with all the Maidan protests in Ukraine in 2014, the annexation of Crimea, the imposition of sanctions, the super controversial Nord Stream 2 pipeline that is going to bring Russian natural gas to Germany. So Germany is always in this awkward situation when it comes to Russia. And I think this is because for years and years and years, the Germans have been trying to pursue this two-track policy when it comes to Russia. On the one hand, Germany is willing to criticize and in some extreme cases punish Russian behavior when it comes to like annexing parts of another sovereign state,
right,
while trying to keep economic issues separate, right? They say our trade relationship is important. We import so much natural gas from Russia that we want to jeopardize that. But the thing is, this balance is really hard to maintain, right? And Germany right now has a three-party coalition government, and some of the parties are happy with this continuation of the two-track policy, but others are saying this is not going anywhere, and this is creating lots of problems with our Western partners.
Yeah, I have a question for you about that. I mean, what's your kind of sense of, are these Russia tensions leading, splitting the German coalition, or is there any signs that it's forcing the parties to come together more on Russia than they would have maybe otherwise?
I think the coalition is internally divided. You have parties like Chancellor Scholz, Social Democratic Party, which has a very significant, for the lack of a better term, pro-Russia sector that promotes this idea of engaging with Russia, keeping negotiation channels with Russia open, keeping diplomatic ties with Russia open, protecting the supplies of Russian natural gas to Germany. And there's other members of the coalition, in particular some sectors of the Green Party and some sectors of the Free Liberal Party, which defend this idea of a values-based foreign policy, according to which somebody has to stop Russia. Somebody has to tell them enough is enough. You can't go around bullying the countries in your neighborhood and pretend that nothing will happen. Yeah. So I would say it's a source of division within the German government.
Yeah.
So
what's fascinating for me to watch is I see a lot of the Ukrainians also are aware of these internal divisions, and I see, for example, op-eds in the Ukrainian press will be addressed just to the Green Party, right? The idea being that, oh, maybe we need to get our foot in the door with at least one of the parties in this coalition that could, exert more influence and maybe help get our position to the chancellor and things like that. And so my fear, though, is that kind of stuff only makes these tensions that you're talking about worse.
And there's, of course, there's the issue of Central and Eastern European countries, right? Your Estonias, your Latvias, your Polands, even Romania, who are, for obvious reasons and for historical reasons, they are terrified and they are like very, very sensitive to anything that looks like an attempt of Russian aggression, right? They have lived with that huge neighbor to their east all of their history. So for them, it's also a kind of a test of NATO's resolve, of the European Union's unity. They are much more worried. I mean, the closer you are to Russia, the more worried you are. If you are like Portugal, maybe you don't care that much. Right. But if you are Estonia, potentially the long-term survival of your state is at stake. So it's and with all these divisions, it makes a lot of sense for the European Union to be internally divided.
Right. Do you get the sense that, like, are people like Macron or the Italies, or, I mean, are they becoming more sensitive to the East, or is it more kind of like eye rolling and like, oh, yet again?
Italy is a very interesting case. Italy is the eternal negotiator. Italy's foreign policy has always been, let's talk, let's sit on the table, let's try to make this work, let's try to make a deal, right? And the Italians have also, maybe not to the same extent as the Germans, but the Italians have also been in an awkward position with all of this because they export so much from food to Ferraris to Russia that they have always been quite skeptical of cutting, severing ties with Russia. Only, was it yesterday, the day before, that there was a huge business delegation of Italian businessmen actually talking to President Putin.
Yes.
I mean, and it doesn't happen very often. It's not Putin is not the kind of guy who goes around having Zoom calls with businessmen. So it shows that the trade, the econ relationship between Russia and Italy is quite important.
And Putin, it's an example of what we talked about earlier, of Putin loving to show that, look, I have these good cards. I have leverage over your countries and some of your businesses and so on. So, it pumps his ego.
Yeah, we are kind of running out of time, but Matt, for people watching us right now or for people watching us later, what are the main signposts or the things that you will be looking at in the next days and weeks? What kind of things would send you the message that things are escalating or that things are de-escalating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's so many ways that this could develop, right? I mean, I think that in terms of kind of dates to look for, events to look for, obviously we're waiting for Russia's formal response. So we've already had President Putin indicate that, we're not seeing a serious enough of attempt to satisfy our main demands, which is about Ukraine and NATO activities in Ukraine. They want the door kind of slammed on Ukraine very tightly and very clearly. So obviously the Russian response is the most important thing. Are they saying, okay, let's continue dialogue, or are they saying, oh no, we'll resume talks, in a couple of weeks after, our buildup continues and we feel our leverage is even higher. That's what I think is most likely. I think it's unlikely that they just slam the door on talks, because even if they decide that they want to do this invasion or continue to threaten it, you would want to have the diplomatic talks as a cover and also a last resort. Always keep it open. The next thing to look for is this Xi Putin meeting that's coming up. President Putin will go to China for the opening of the Beijing Olympics, and people are watching to see Putin is going to very strongly hint at and probably exaggerate the support of China, the extent of China's support for Russia, because Putin feels that this will give Russia more leverage in the talks if it can exaggerate how much, we're so ready to, leverage our Chinese support in these talks with you. And then the final thing to be looking out for is these Russia-Belarus military exercises that are one of the big reasons that this buildup is allegedly taking place. The preparation phase for that ends on February 9th, and they conclude on February 20th, which is the last day of the Olympics. So we really think that tensions are going to continue to rise. We're not even at the peak of this thing yet. So buckle your seatbelt, Adriano. It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, indeed. So thank you so much, Matt, for that overview. Take some rest, not a lot of rest, because we need you to keep forecasting for us. But yeah, it's been a tough few weeks, and it's gonna be tense for a few more weeks. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and thanks to everyone watching. You can always come to RANE for the best forecasts, keep you updated with everything that's happening around the world, and more importantly, what it means for you, what the implications are. So yeah. In any case, just come to us and we will be happy to help you forecast the work. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.